Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're jumping into a really strange allegorical story. It's all about a world where people are just addicted to, well, to checking out. And the whole thing revolves around this simple kind of magical carpet. But really, it's just a way to explore these massive ideas, like reality versus delusion and the powerful systems that actually profit from our desire to escape. So let's get into it.
All right, so just think about this for a second. What if you could roll out a mat, sit down, and poof, you're your own country, legally. You can just declare your little personal bubble a sovereign nation. It's a pretty wild idea, right? But that's the core premise here. What would a world like that even be like?
So what is this device? In the story, it's called a drug. And it's basically a padded carpet that lets you legally ignore everything and everyone around you by creating your very own private country, with a population of 1. It's escapism you can literally carry around with you, and the law says it's all good.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll talk about the sovereign of the corner. Then, we'll dive into a system of delusion. After that, we've got the whistleblower's stand, followed by a bifurcated reality. And we'll wrap it all up with the story's really wild conclusion, the spiritual warriors.
All right, first up, the sovereign of the corner. Let's dig into where this D-rug thing even came from. How does a simple carpet become this ultimate tool for just escaping it all? And what's the big promise for the people who use it?
Well, the guy who sells the D-rug, his pitch really says it all. He makes it super clear. This isn't just some rug. It's a ticket to absolute power. In your own private country, you're the only voter. You're the president for life. You can just grant yourself instant happiness. You have total control. That's a pretty powerful idea.
And you can see what happens in practice, right? The users, they call them rugaholics in the story. They just check out completely. They ignore their schoolwork, their parents, their teachers. They get to avoid all the so-called pain and suffering of actually learning. They can even issue what the story calls executive orders to just give themselves an A on a test they never even took. It's a total rejection of shared reality.
Okay, but here's where it gets really fascinating. This isn't just some fad the kids are into. The story makes it super clear that the entire system, I'm talking the school, the authorities, they're all in on it. They're actively propping this whole thing up.
And if you look at this, you can see the pretty cynical deal being made. For the school, it's all about money and efficiency. They get a cut of every drug sale, they can manage 5 times more students with 1 teacher, and they can replace expensive teachers with cheaper drug assistants. And for the students, they get effortless gratification. It's this perfect loop where the institution profits from the students just checking out of reality. So how on earth do they justify all this? Well, the story introduces this really clever tool, a type of language it calls woke salad speak. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's using a ton of complicated academic-sounding jargon to make things that are totally illogical sound really smart. It's the intellectual glue holding this whole delusional system together.
And the main architect of this system is a bureaucrat named Abby. She is an absolute master of this language. She uses her credentials to build these frameworks that don't solve problems, they monetize them. She literally creates a world where failure is incentivized, turning addiction and incompetence into grant opportunities, all justified by these super complex-sounding theories.
But, a system like this can't last forever. There's always a breaking point. And in this story, it happens when one student just decides, nope, I'm not doing this. And that single decision sparks this huge battle over what's real and what isn't.
So our protagonist is Evan, and this quote from him really gets to the heart of what he believes. For him, creativity isn't for escaping reality, it's for enhancing it. It's a tool to make the world we actually live in better. And that idea, right there, is the complete opposite of what the D-rug is all about.
So what's his plan? It's actually incredibly simple, but really direct. First, he just refuses to use a D-rug himself. Then, he starts handing out whistles to other students. And the whole point is to disrupt things. They blow the whistles, and that loud, piercing sound is enough to shatter the fantasy dream state of the users. It forces them to wake up, if only for a moment, and engage with the real world.
And you can probably guess what happens next. The system pushes back, hard. Evan gets suspended, and they twist his actions around. Instead of a call to reality, they call it an act of intolerance. They label him rug-phobic and accuse him of spreading misinformation. They basically use language as a weapon to protect their whole profitable setup.
Well, this whole thing blows up and eventually ends up in court. But the ruling from the judge, it's not a clear win for either side. It's this weird compromise that basically splits reality in two, and that, of course, just creates a whole new mess of problems.
So check this out. The court's verdict is wild. On one hand, Evan kinda wins. Drugs are banned in schools, the school's commission is a breach of duty, and that whole executive order self-grading thing is gone. But, on the other hand, the court protects an individual's God-given right to escape reality in public. So you can still set up your independent rugocracy at home or on a sidewalk. It creates this bizarre paradox where reality is mandatory at school but optional everywhere else. So this court ruling is a total game changer. The fight isn't about laws or school rules anymore. The story completely shifts gears and says, this is a spiritual battle now. The rules of the physical world are set, so the narrative takes this huge leap, suggesting the real fight has to happen on a completely different plane of existence. To fight this new battle, the heroes create a headquarters called the Forge. And it's not some political office. It's more like a training ground for the soul. The whole idea is that it's a place to forge the inner strength, the discipline and willpower that you need to consciously choose reality over delusion.
And this is where the story's toolkit goes completely metaphysical. The spiritual warriors are trained to use these really esoteric concepts as weapons. We're talking about a tube of light for protection, a violet flame for spiritual cleansing, and something called the science of the spoken word, which is about using decrees to command spiritual energy. It's a whole new arsenal for a whole new kind of war.
But just when you think they've found a new way to fight, the system strikes back again. That bureaucrat, Abby, she returns. And this time she uses the law to get an injunction against the Forge. She successfully shuts it down by labeling this group, a group dedicated to self-discipline, a cult. So once again, they weaponize language to defend the status quo.
But even with their center boarded up, the story's heroes don't quit. And this final quote from Evan really captures their unwavering mission. It's a call to action. It's an argument that building a better reality requires active engagement, not passive escape. You have to stand up, literally and figuratively.
And that brings us to the core question this whole story leaves us with. Is our connection to reality just a given, or is it a skill? After seeing a world where opting out is so easy, the narrative forces us to ask if engaging with the world is something that actually requires conscious training, discipline, and constant practice. It's an interesting thought to end on. Thanks for joining me for this one.